Grandmother, Catherine Hamilton, died. I was elbow-deep in soil, tending to her prized rose garden. She had taught me everything about those roses, which varieties needed more sun, how to prune them just right, and most importantly, how to nurture their roots so they'd flourish for generations. "These roses are like secrets, Sarah," she'd often say, her blue eyes twinkling with hidden knowledge. "Some bloom bright and bold, while others hide their beauty until the perfect moment." I didn't understand what she meant then, but I would soon enough. The call came from Mr. Patterson, her attorney, his voice carrying the weight of decades managing the Hamilton family's legal affairs. "Miss Hamilton, I'm afraid I have difficult news. Your grandmother passed away in her sleep last night." The rose clippers slipped from my hands, landing silently in the soft earth. My grandmother, the woman who had raised me after my parents' death, who had been more of a mother to me than anyone else, was gone. "There's something else," Patterson continued, his voice dropping slightly. "She left explicit instructions about her will. The reading is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Your presence is mandatory." I barely registered his words, my mind still struggling to process the loss. "Of course, I'll be there." "One more thing, Miss Hamilton. Your grandmother insisted that all family members must attend, including your Uncle Marcus." My hand tightened around the phone. Uncle Marcus, my father's younger brother and the current CEO of Hamilton Industries. The man who had spent years trying to convince grandmother to sell her controlling shares in the company. The man whose very presence made the air feel thick with tension at every family gathering. "I understand," I replied, though I didn't. Not really. The next day, I arrived at Patterson and Associates, the law firm that had handled Hamilton family matters since before I was born. The office occupied the entire top floor of a historic downtown building, its dark wood panels and leather-bound books speaking of old money and even older secrets. Uncle Marcus was already there, impeccable in his tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. Aunt Diana, his wife, sat beside him, her face a mask of practiced sympathy. Their children, my cousins William and Victoria, completed the picture of the perfect grieving family. I took a seat across from them, suddenly conscious of my simple black dress and the dirt still lingering beneath my fingernails from yesterday's gardening. Uncle Marcus's eyes flickered over me, his lip curling slightly. "Sarah," he nodded curtly. "I trust you're well." Before I could respond, Mr. Patterson entered, carrying a thick manila envelope. He settled behind his massive desk, adjusting his reading glasses with practiced precision. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice grave. "We're here to discuss Catherine Hamilton's last will and testament. But before we proceed, she left specific instructions about how this meeting should be conducted." He opened the envelope, pulling out several documents. "First, I must confirm that all named parties are present." "Marcus Hamilton?" "Present," my uncle answered, his deep voice filling the room. "Diana Hamilton?" "Here," Aunt Diana whispered. "William and Victoria Hamilton." My cousins murmured their acknowledgments. "And Sarah Hamilton?" "Present," I said softly. Patterson nodded, satisfied. "Very well. Mrs. Hamilton's will is unusual. She has divided her estate into 2 parts." Uncle Marcus leaned forward slightly, his fingers drumming against his armrest. "The first part concerns Hamilton Industries. As you know, Catherine held controlling interest in the company, 51% of all voting shares." Patterson paused, glancing at each of us in turn. "These shares, along with her other business holdings, will be held in trust for 30 days. Held in trust? Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. For what purpose? Patterson raised a hand. Please let me finish. After 30 days, the shares and business holdings, valued at approximately $50 million, will be transferred to Sarah Hamilton. The room erupted in chaos. Uncle Marcus shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. This is absurd. Sarah has no business experience, no understanding of the company. She spends her days playing in the dirt. Victoria let out a small, shocked laugh. William just stared at me, his expression unreadable. I sat there, frozen. $50 million. Control of Hamilton Industries. It felt surreal, like a dream I couldn't quite grasp. But Patterson wasn't finished. He pulled out another envelope, this one sealed with dark red wax, bearing my grandmother's personal seal. However, he continued, silencing the room, there is one condition. All eyes turned to him as he held up the sealed envelope. This contains information that Mrs. Hamilton insisted must be revealed at the upcoming Hamilton family reunion, scheduled for exactly 30 days from today. If the information is not disclosed as specified, the entire inheritance will be donated to charity. Uncle Marcus's face had gone from red to white. What information? Patterson shook his head. I don't know. The envelope is sealed and addressed only to Sarah. He extended the envelope toward me. As I reached for it, I noticed something strange. Uncle Marcus's hands were trembling. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. You can't possibly expect us to wait 30 days while some gardener holds the company's fate in her hands. I took the envelope, feeling its weight, not just in physical terms, but in the way it seemed to carry the weight of secrets spanning decades. Those are Mrs. Hamilton's terms, Patterson said firmly. The family reunion will be held at Hamilton Manor as tradition dictates. Sarah must attend and reveal the contents of this envelope. Only then will the inheritance be officially transferred. As I left the law office that day, the sealed envelope secure in my bag, I caught Uncle Marcus watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't just anger or frustration, it was fear. Walking to my car, I ran my fingers over the envelope's wax seal. What secret could be so important that my grandmother would stake $50 million on its revelation? And why did Uncle Marcus look so terrified? I didn't know then that the answer would shake the Hamilton family to its core, or that the next 30 days would change everything I thought I knew about my family's legacy. That night, I sat in my small apartment above the local flower shop I managed, staring at the envelope. The wax seal gleamed in the lamplight, almost daring me to break it. But something held me back. Perhaps the same instinct my grandmother had taught me about timing when tending to her roses. Some secrets, her voice echoed in my memory, are like the rarest blooms. They must be revealed at exactly the right moment. I placed the envelope in my safe, beside the only photo I had of my parents. Tomorrow, I would begin preparing for the family reunion, and whatever shocking truth lay sealed within that mysterious envelope. Little did I know, Uncle Marcus was already making plans of his own. Plans that would force me to decide between wealth and truth, between family loyalty and justice. The game was about to begin, and the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. As I finally drifted off to sleep that night, my grandmother's words echoed once more in my mind. Remember, Sarah, every rose has its thorns, but it's the thorns that protect the most beautiful blooms. I was about to discover just how sharp those thorns could be. The morning after the will reading, I woke to 3 missed calls from Uncle Marcus, and a text message that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk. Now." I sat in my small kitchen, watching steam rise from my coffee cup while considering my options. The sealed envelope lay before me, its red wax seal catching the morning light. Something about it felt heavy, like it carried more than just paper inside. My phone buzzed again. "Uncle Marcus." This time, I answered. "Sarah." His voice was controlled, measured, the same tone he used during difficult board meetings. "I'm outside your shop." I moved to window. Sure enough, his black Mercedes was parked in front of my modest flower shop, looking completely out of place among the local businesses. "Come up," I said, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. Minutes later, Uncle Marcus stepped into my apartment, his expensive suit a stark contrast to my simple living space. His eyes darted around, taking in the potted plants, the gardening books, the framed pressed flowers on the walls. "Charming," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Your grandmother certainly taught you well about plants." I gestured to a chair. "What do you want, Uncle Marcus?" He sat down, adjusting his gold cufflinks, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the years. "Let's be practical about this, Sarah. You're not equipped to run Hamilton Industries. The company employs thousands of people. Our decisions affect lives, markets, entire industries. And you think I can't handle that responsibility? This isn't about capability. It's about experience, knowledge, connections." He leaned forward. "I've spent 30 years building this company. Your father, my brother, would have wanted." "Don't." My voice was sharp. "Don't talk about what my father would have wanted." A flash of something, guilt, fear, crossed his face. "Fine," he said, reaching into his jacket. "Let's talk numbers instead." He pulled out a checkbook. $20 million. Cash. You sign over grandmother's shares to me, and you never have to work another day in your life. I stared at him. "And the envelope?" "Destroy it. Whatever's inside. Some things are better left in the past." The way his hand trembled slightly as he held the checkbook told me everything I needed to know. He was terrified of what was in that envelope. "No deal," I said quietly. His facade cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing. That envelope. There are things you don't know about this family, about your father. Then maybe it's time I learned them." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Think carefully about your next move, Sarah. Not everyone in this family will be as generous as I'm being." After he left, I sat there for a long time, thinking about his words. What didn't I know about my father? About this family? I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start looking. That afternoon, I drove to Hamilton Manor, my grandmother's estate, and the heart of our family's legacy. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who had served our family for over 40 years, greeted me with knowing eyes. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, leading me inside. "Your grandmother left something for you in the library." The library was exactly as I remembered. Walls of leather-bound books, the scent of old paper and wood polish, and my grandmother's antique desk dominating the room. Mrs. Chen walked to a painting behind the desk, a landscape of the manor grounds, and carefully removed it from the wall. Behind it was a safe. "She changed the combination last month," Mrs. Chen said. "To your birthday. Inside the safe, I found a leather journal and a USB drive. The journal's first page bore my grandmother's elegant handwriting. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've already received the envelope. What it contains will change everything, but before you open it, you need to understand why. This journal contains the truth about the night your parents died, about your uncle's rise to power, and about the real reason I've chosen you to inherit everything. Be careful who you trust. The walls of Hamilton Manor have ears, and not everyone in this family deserves the name they carry. All my love, Grandmother Catherine. My hands trembled as I turned the page. What I read next made my heart stop. According to the journal, the car accident that killed my parents 20 years ago might not have been an accident at all. My grandmother had been investigating it for years, gathering evidence, following leads that the police had overlooked or been paid to ignore. The USB drive contained financial records, emails, and surveillance footage, a digital trail that pointed to a horrifying conclusion. Someone had tampered with my father's car the night he and my mother died. Someone who stood to gain from their deaths. Someone who took control of Hamilton Industries immediately after. Someone like Uncle Marcus. But before I could read more, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly tucked the journal and USB drive into my bag just as Victoria, my cousin, entered the library. "I thought I saw your car outside," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Finding anything interesting?" "Just memories," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Victoria walked to the desk, running her fingers along its polished surface. "You know, Dad's really upset about all this. He built this company from nothing after Uncle James died. It's not fair that you just swoop in and take everything." I bit back a laugh. Built from nothing. Hamilton Industries had been thriving when my father ran it. It was only after his death that Uncle Marcus took control. "Your father will survive," I said, standing to leave. "Maybe." Victoria's voice turned cold. "But will you?" I stopped at the door. "Is that a threat, cousin?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course not. Just be careful, Sarah. Accidents happen in this family. Just ask your parents." I left Hamilton Manor with my heart pounding and my mind reeling. The journal in my bag felt like it weighed a ton, its secrets burning to be revealed. That night, I sat in my apartment reading every page of my grandmother's journal. The story it told was worse than I could have imagined. Corporate espionage, betrayal, murder, all hidden behind the respectable facade of the Hamilton name. But the most shocking revelation wasn't about my parents' death. It was about what happened after. About a series of decisions and deals that had turned Hamilton Industries from a respected family company into something darker. And Uncle Marcus was at the center of it all. As I read, pieces started falling into place. The frequent late-night meetings at the Manor, the mysterious overseas accounts, the sudden resignations of board members who asked too many questions. It all pointed to a pattern of corruption that went beyond simple corporate greed. My grandmother had discovered it all, documented everything, but instead of exposing it immediately, she had waited, gathering more evidence, building an ironclad case. She knew that against someone like Uncle Marcus, you only got one chance. The family reunion was in 3 weeks. According to tradition, every member of the Hamilton family would be there, including board members, shareholders, and the press. The perfect audience for the truth to finally come out. But as I sat there surrounded by evidence of decades of deception, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. I wasn't the first person to discover these secrets. My father had known too. That's why he died. A knock at my door made me jump. It was past midnight. Who could be here at this hour? Through the peephole, I saw William, my other cousin, looking anxious. I opened the door cautiously. "William? What are you doing here?" He pushed past me into the apartment, his usual composed demeanor nowhere to be seen. "Sarah, you need to be careful. Dad, he's not himself. I overheard him talking to some men I've never seen before. They mentioned your name." And he swallowed hard. "They talked about making problems go away." "Why are you telling me this?" William ran a hand through his hair. "Because I found something in Dad's study. Documents about Uncle James, your father, about the night he died." He pulled out a folded paper from his jacket. "This is a copy of a payment made the day before the accident, to someone with expertise in car mechanics." I took the paper with trembling hands. The amount was substantial, the recipient's name unfamiliar. I always knew something wasn't right about that night. William continued. "But I never had proof until now." "Why show me this? He's your father." William's face hardened. "Because he's not the man I thought he was. And because—" he hesitated, "because Uncle James was good to me. He didn't deserve what happened to him." After William left, I added his document to my grandmother's evidence. The picture it painted was becoming clearer and more dangerous by the minute. I needed to be careful. Uncle Marcus wouldn't stop at threats. He'd already proven how far he'd go to protect his secrets. The family reunion was approaching, and with it, the moment when all these secrets would finally come to light. But first, I had to survive the next 3 weeks. Little did I know, Uncle Marcus was already setting his plan in motion. A plan that would force me to choose between justice and survival, between exposing the truth and protecting what little family I had left. The game was no longer just about an inheritance. It was about justice, revenge, and the true meaning of family. And somewhere in Hamilton Manor, the clock was ticking down to a revelation that would shatter the Hamilton name forever. The day of the Hamilton family reunion arrived with an unusual chill for early summer. As I drove up the winding path to Hamilton Manor, my grandmother's sealed envelope sat heavy in my designer handbag, a rare, expensive purchase I'd made for today's occasion. Inside my jacket pocket, a small USB drive contained copies of every document, every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past month. I'd learned from my father's mistakes. If anything happened to me, multiple copies of everything would be sent to the press, the police, and the SEC. The manor's grand facade loomed before me, its windows gleaming in the morning sun. Cars already lined the circular driveway, sleek luxury vehicles belonging to board members, shareholders, and family members who only appeared at events like these. Mrs. Chen met me at the door, her eyes conveying silent support. "They're all in the main hall," she whispered. "Your uncle has been asking about you." I nodded, straightening my spine. The past 3 weeks had been a careful dance of avoiding Uncle Marcus's increasingly aggressive attempts to resolve the situation. First came the threats disguised as warnings, then the suspicious car that followed me for days, and finally, the break-in at my apartment that was made to look like a robbery. But they hadn't found what they were looking for. The evidence remained safe, distributed across multiple locations, waiting for this moment. The main hall buzzed with conversation as I entered. Heads turned, whispers followed. Everyone knew about the inheritance, about the mysterious condition, about the tension tearing apart the Hamilton family. Uncle Marcus stood near the fireplace, holding court with several board members. His smile faltered when he saw me, his hand tightening around his crystal whiskey glass. Victoria approached first, her designer dress rustling as she moved. "Glad you could make it, cousin. Though you really should have had your hair done professionally for such an important occasion." I touched my simple updo, the same style my mother used to wear. Some things are better kept simple. Speaking of simple, she lowered her voice. Dad has another offer for you. 10 million more than before. Last chance. I met her gaze steadily. Tell him I'm not interested. She shrugged, the gesture too casual to be genuine. Your funeral. As she walked away, William caught my eye from across the room. He gave me a slight nod. Our agreed-upon signal that everything was in place. Over the past weeks, he'd become an unexpected ally, helping me gather additional evidence while maintaining his cover as the dutiful son. The grandfather clock struck noon, its deep chimes silencing the room. According to tradition, this was when the family photograph would be taken, followed by lunch, and then the annual family meeting where company matters were discussed. Uncle Marcus cleared his throat. Everyone, please gather around. The photographer is ready. As people arranged themselves by the grand staircase, I took my position near the edge of the group. Through the camera's lens, we'd look like the perfect family. Wealthy, successful, united. If only they knew what was about to happen. After the photos, we moved to the dining room. Crystal glasses clinked, silver cutlery gleamed, and conversation flowed as smoothly as the expensive wine. I barely touched my food, watching as Uncle Marcus grew increasingly tense with each passing minute. Finally, it was time for the family meeting. Board members, shareholders, and family members filed into the manor's wood-paneled conference room. Journalists from select financial publications, invited to cover Hamilton Industries' latest announcements, sat in the back, notepads ready. Uncle Marcus took his place at the head of the table, exactly where my father used to sit. Before we begin discussing company matters, he said, his voice carrying across the room, I believe my niece has something she'd like to share with us. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment my grandmother had planned for, the moment 20 years in the making. I stood slowly, removing the sealed envelope from my bag. The red wax seal caught the light, drawing every gaze in the room. As you all know, I began, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. My grandmother left me her controlling shares in Hamilton Industries on one condition, that I reveal the contents of this envelope today, before all of you. Uncle Marcus's knuckles were white as he gripped the arms of his chair. I broke the seal carefully, pulling out several photographs and documents. The first photo showed my father in his office, looking concerned as he examined some papers. The timestamp showed it was taken the day before his death. 20 years ago, I continued. My parents died in what we were told was a tragic accident. But my grandmother never believed it was an accident. She spent years investigating, gathering evidence, following leads that others had overlooked or been paid to ignore. Murmurs rippled through the room. I placed the first document on the table, a copy of a bank transfer. This payment was made to a mechanic the day before my parents' death. A mechanic who specialized in brake systems. The same mechanic was found dead from an apparent suicide 2 weeks later. Uncle Marcus stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly. I'm not finished. My voice cut through his protest like a knife. The same day this payment was made, someone accessed my father's office after hours. The security footage, which was supposedly lost, shows exactly who it was. I nodded to William, who connected his laptop to the room's projection system. The grainy footage played, showing Uncle Marcus entering my father's office late at night, removing documents from the safe. The next morning, I continued as the footage played. My father confronted Uncle Marcus about what he'd found. Evidence of embezzlement, offshore accounts, deals with shell companies that existed only on paper. Hours later, my parents were dead. The room had gone completely silent. Even the journalists had stopped writing, their pens frozen mid-sentence. But that was just the beginning. I laid out more documents, bank statements, emails, surveillance photos. Over the next 20 years, Hamilton Industries under Marcus Hamilton's leadership became a front for money laundering, tax evasion, and corporate fraud on a massive scale. Victoria jumped to her feet. "You're lying. This is all fabricated." "Every document has been verified," I cut in. "Every transaction traced. Every witness statement recorded. My grandmother spent years building this case, making sure it was ironclad before she died." I turned to the journalists. "You'll each find a complete digital copy of all evidence in your email inboxes. The SEC, FBI, and Department of Justice received their copies an hour ago." The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouted questions. Shareholders reached for their phones. Family members stared in shock or anger, or both. Through it all, Uncle Marcus remained eerily still, his face drained of color. Then slowly, he began to laugh. A hollow, broken sound that silenced the room. "You're just like him," he said, staring at me with something between hatred and admiration. "James always thought he could fix everything, make everything right. Look where it got him." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm not like my father. I'm like my grandmother. I waited. I planned. I made sure you couldn't stop the truth from coming out." As if on cue, the conference room doors opened. Federal agents streamed in, led by a stern-faced woman who held up her badge. "Marcus Hamilton," she announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and the murders of James and Eleanor Hamilton." I watched as they led him away in handcuffs, Victoria's screams and William's quiet resignation fading into background noise. Outside, camera flashes exploded as journalists captured the moment the mighty Marcus Hamilton was brought low. Hours later, after the agents had gone, after the journalists had filed their stories, after shell-shocked family members had driven away in their luxury cars, I stood alone in my grandmother's rose garden. The roses were in full bloom, their petals catching the last rays of sunlight. I knelt down, touching one gently, remembering all the lessons my grandmother had taught me here. "You were right," I whispered to her memory. "Some secrets do need perfect timing to bloom. Mrs. Chen found me there as darkness fell. Your grandmother would be proud," she said softly. "Both of your parents would be." I nodded, standing up and brushing dirt from my knees. "What happens now?" She smiled. "Now you do what your father always wanted. Run the company the right way. Your way." The next morning, as I sat in what had once been my father's office, now mine, I looked out over the city. Hamilton Industries would survive this scandal, emerge stronger, cleaner. The roses in my grandmother's garden would continue to bloom, their beauty no longer hiding thorny secrets.